Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's 5:30, April 25, and this is the meeting of the Ad Hoc Tip Subcommittee of the Citizens Advisory Committee. I'm not sure who all is on the call right now, so I'm going to ask for a roll for the record. Johnny, can you call the roll?
Gail, are you recording? Do you have the attendance sheet up?
Bill Roberts is on.
Gail, you're muted. Since I'm not hearing anything from you, give me 1 second. And I'll pull up the attendance
Here.
sheet. Oh, hey, Gail.
Hi, I'm sorry. Did you take roll call or did you just want me to do it via it's virtual off of the attendees?
Yeah, will you take the roll, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Give me 1 second.
Gail, excuse me. I'm just going to log off and back on really quick. I'm trying to log on from another computer. So if I disappear for a second, I'm still here.
Who's speaking?
This is Aya Yassin.
Thank you, Aya.
Thank you.
Where's my attendance? Here we go. All right. I do apologize. I've got a little lag. Okay, here we go. Oh, Bill Roberts. I believe I saw him.
Robert's here.
Okay, great. And I see I.E. Lawson, Rick Fernandez, Don
Here.
Skelton.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. David Bailey, Carolyn Brown, Hoyt Prindle, Christina Bosworth, Miaza Morrison, Stephen Hollenkamp, Nicole Rice, let's see, Christina Costa, Artie Fryer.
Christine just logged on.
I see her. Hi, Christine. You're in attendance this evening? And she just muted herself. Okay. And then we have Nicholas Glover. Okay. Ed Marjuski, Jonathan Knudsen, Sharon Gamond, Terrence Trott, he was excused, Rick Richmond, and Joshua Frank. Okay, I've got that attendance for the evening.
Good, thank you. And to those of you who are able to make time to do this evening, thank you so much for the effort. I guess we start out, well, I guess do we really need introductions? I think everybody knows everybody on this call. If anybody feels like introducing themselves, feel free, chime in. All right, not hearing anything. Public comment. I'd be shocked, but do we have anybody in the public comment queue?
I'm not seeing any, Chair.
All right. Then Johnny, I'm going to turn to you for summary of prior meeting. I'm not sure exactly what it is you intended there when you created that line item 4 on the agenda.
Yeah, sure. So in 2021, when we got the subcommittee together to work on the tip, it was led by Amy Espinosa. We had attendance of about 4 or 5, if I can recall correctly. And the way that we organized the subcommittee was, if you recall, we made what I would consider to be a major overhaul of the tip. Prior to 2021, there was a lot of text. It was very difficult to understand. The priority tables, list of funded projects, and the work program were very long. Our goal last year was to make it as brief as possible, striking that right balance between enough information or not too little information and not too much information. So we used the subcommittee as a sounding board to provide guidance to us about what elements of the TIP process were mysterious, what role the TIP serves, what the funding codes mean, the eligible list of projects for each funding code, status of projects, you name it. Basically, the subcommittee really did guide the presentation that the full committee saw in May and June, and with their feedback, we were able to, I think, make some pretty major changes to the way that the priority tables are presented to the public. So I just wanted to explain that, and that's not to say that this subcommittee has to follow the same formula. We can do it however the chair and the subcommittee would like, but that's my recollection of how we had this organized last year.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't part of that subcommittee, but I certainly benefited from your work. So I appreciate that, and hopefully we can follow suit in similar fashion. Johnny asked me to do a purpose of subcommittee recap. So this is my speaking role in this play tonight. I hope not to have to say a whole lot more, and most of this is going to be listening. But especially for those of you who are on the call that haven't been through one of these before, and I guess that's Aya and maybe Don. I don't remember, Don, if you were here last year at this time or not. I don't think so. But the others on the call have been here more than once. So for you, this may be a little redundant. But let me just say this. I've been involved in the TIP process now. I guess this is my 8th year, going back to 2015. And since 2017 as a member of this committee, and still, maybe I'm just slow, but every year I learn something new. And I think every year there's been some layer of the onion that's been peeled back to reveal something that I did not know at all and was an absolute mystery to me. So this is a complex process, and we are learning on the job by doing. And the purpose of this subcommittee, with all respect to what Johnny just told us, which I absolutely do incorporate by reference, I view it as twofold, really. One, it gives all of us who are willing to participate an opportunity to preview the material, gain extra guidance in the review, and understand, hopefully, the process better as we go into the May and June timeframe for the public hearing. Even those of us who have been through it before can stand a refresher. And if you're brand new, it truly is a dark hole. You need a light, and this can be the beginning of that. So on that score, it's educational for us. But on the other side of the coin, I also believe that this committee can act as a focus group, as a sounding board. And I think Johnny just basically confirmed that in his comments. It's a chance for the staff to run the process before us, much like a mock jury, and get our responses, questions, impressions, and then they can respond to that in creating a more effective presentation, not just for us, but for the board. And why does it matter ultimately? Well, again, if you haven't been here before, let me clue you in. It matters because what we have to say does on occasion matter to the mother board. The TPO board, before that the MPO, does listen to the CAC from time to time. And some of our recommendations have in fact broken through in actual action by the board over the course of the last several years. And to distill it down to the bare essence, the more well-informed we are, the more well-reasoned our recommendations, the more likely it is that our recommendations will be adopted. And even if not adopted, can still inform their decisions. So the more well-informed we are, the more effective we can be in our role and the better service we can be to the community and the board. So that's, to me, that's what this is all about. And with that said, I'm going to shut up. Johnny, you have a very nice PowerPoint presentation, and unless you have something else you want to do first, why don't you go ahead and move on to that agenda item?
Thank you, Rick, for the introduction. So let me just say that since we have such a small, intimate group, if it's the chair's wish, I'm certainly willing to pause at any time and field questions. Rick, as chair, it's kind of up to you about how you want to run the meeting, but I will tell you everything that I know, and I'll admit before we even begin that there's a lot about the tip that I don't know, and I'll try to get answers if you have any questions that stump me.
Okay. As an organizational matter, I don't have problems if people on the call want to interrupt your presentation and ask questions as we go along. At least initially, I feel that way. If we start getting too bogged down, I may change my mind. But go ahead and let's just see how we do.
Okay, great. So what I prepared is a preliminary draft of the tip. This is mostly informational. What we learned from the focus group or subcommittee last year is that much of the tip was mysterious, and many of the members were not willing or unable to make the time investment to understand the tip in its full breadth and scope. The primary reason that they shared was that because it was just so long. Prior to last year, I believe the tip was maybe 300 or 400 pages in total, including appendices. We were able to get the tip document down to about 40 last year, which I think made a huge impact on people's willingness to actually read the thing. But some of the comments that were shared with us were that it was intimidating. It was difficult to understand all projects because many of the projects were not described very well. You might see a code that has meaning to someone at FDOT or the county, but a member of the public who's unfamiliar with these projects would certainly not be able to pick up the tip and make sense of a funding code that they've never seen before. The subcommittee also told us that it was difficult to understand the connection between the long-range transportation plan and the TIP. So we spent some time explaining the difference between the two and how they work together. They also noted that they wanted to be able to understand why certain projects were needed, what makes a project get onto the Table 2 priority list from the get-go. And so we took some time to address all of those questions and concerns, and that is what I used to create the presentation that follows. So the first section of this presentation is about how you could decode the tip. And I wrote these slides from my perspective, assuming that I was somebody who had never seen the tip before. I kind of thought about what pieces of information I might need to make sense of the tip at all. So that's what you're going to see. To begin with, I'll explain what the TIP is. It stands for a Transportation Improvement Program, but we rarely, if ever, say that. So we just call it a TIP. It's a plan that has 5 years worth of transportation projects in it. You might see references to years beyond 5. So for example, the fiscal years that this TIP update will cover is from 22-23 to 26-27. That's 5 fiscal years. In some of the tables, you might see references to projects that have funding before 23 or later than 27. And there's a good reason why you might see that. There are times in which a project might receive a portion of its funding in fiscal year 22, and then for whatever reason, it's shelved, or design or preliminary engineering might take a very long time, and funding just spans longer than 5-year period. Some other projects we may recognize as a priority, as in we know that they will need to be constructed at some point in time, but we don't feel strongly enough to program funds within the next 5. Maybe we think it's a project that could stand to wait for 10 or maybe even longer or even more years, in which case we might annotate that we're recommending funding later than 2027. Those are specific details that we can talk about later when I present the tables to you. But anyway, to get back to my point, the TIP is 5 years worth of projects. Those 5 years represent the first 5 years of a 25-year vision that we create, which is the long-range transportation plan. A couple of you may have been involved when we last updated our LRTP in 2019. The LRTP is much more general. I kind of want to say vague. That's maybe not the best way to put it, but it is intentionally broad and visionary. It describes a rough vision of the future of the county. So there's not a ton of detail in it. It explains the needs in very generic terminology, because 25 years worth of projects is impossible to provide a significant level of detail. We don't know exactly what all of the needs are. We don't know which roads will need safety treatments or congestion treatments. All we know is that we will need those types of projects. The TIP, however, our goal is to provide a considerable amount of detail in it, not a ton of detail that you might see in a one-year work program, but we have a pretty good idea of what the county's needs will be over the next 5 years. So when you see a project listed in the TIP, it usually has a pretty accurate description of what the work will be. We have a pretty good idea of what phase will need to be funded within the next 5 years. We have a pretty good idea of how much money we'll need to fund those projects. And we certainly have a really good idea of where that project will be located. So rather than saying, we know the county will need safety projects, we're able to say now that we have a safety problem on Hillsborough Ave between X and Y streets. That's where this safety project needs to go. So that's kind of like that's like the very broad understanding of what the TIP is. There are a ton of rules that pertain to the TIP. It's one of the MPO's primary responsibilities, LRTP and the TIP. Those are like the top 2 projects that we work on each year. And there are a ton of federal and state requirements that apply to us in developing the TIP. I bulleted out some of the requirements that I think are most relevant to the CAC's mission. And those are that the TIP has to be consistent with the adopted LRTP, meaning that if the long-range plan has a goal of improving safety and reducing congestion, the TIP should include projects that will achieve those goals. We can't come up with a goal in the TIP that doesn't already exist in the long-range transportation plan. Projects that are in the TIP have to be developed in coordination with transit agencies, or the transit agency, which is HART, and FDOT. Any regionally significant projects have to appear in the TIP, and we draw special attention to those projects because we know that the community has a lot of interest in projects that have far reach. Any projects that are funded by the Federal Highway Administration or the Federal Transit Administration will show up. Most of the time, projects that are funded with federal highway dollars or FTA dollars are from federal matching grants, so they may have regional significance anyway, but just to make sure that all those projects are included in the TIP, there's like 2 separate requirements that would apply to those projects. Those projects in the TIP also have to be cost feasible. So we can't just include projects in the TIP that don't have a funding source that can be relied on. We can't say we're going to fund this transit project with a GoFundMe or something like that. It has to be a discernible funding stream and in an amount that's in an amount that would be kind of realistic to be available depending upon the funding source. We also have to develop the TIP in consultation with the public. So every year we spend quite a bit of time informing the public that the TIP hearing is coming up. We take at least 30 days to put the draft TIP and priority list on our website. We present it to all of the subcommittees, not subcommittees, we present it to all of the committees before the board sees it. A couple of years ago, we made a commitment to bring it to the committees at least the TAC and the CAC twice rather than just once before adoption. If I get requests from any community groups to present the tip to them, make a really good effort to actually show up. I have a meeting to present this to the EBOR CRA in a couple weeks. So we spend a lot of time engaging the public to make sure that they have a say in what projects make it onto the priority list and also how we rank projects. In essence, well, I shouldn't say in essence, because a lot of people can see the tip performs many different functions, but I see it as maybe the most simple way as I can, and that it's really just 3 lists. We produce the tip in 3 tables, and each table serves a different purpose. Table 1 is a list of projects that have demonstrated a value to the community. These projects were prioritized, and what that means is they scored highly according to a number of quantitative and qualitative metrics. So they made it onto the priority list, and then they have received some construction funding. So projects that are on table 1 will have, well, when completed, they will have a positive impact on some of the goals that we identified in our long-range plan, and they either have programmed funding or construction funds are available currently. Those projects remain on table 1 until they're totally complete. Even though a project has some funding, like the West Shore Interchange, for example, it just got some funding with a TIP amendment back in October. The entire project isn't yet funded, so we leave it on that table until, you know, it's just to kind of show that it still has community support that allows FDOT to go out and seek additional funds to complete that project. Table 2 is a list of projects that have shown value to the community, and they are ranked in order of how much positive benefits or how many positive benefits they will have when completed. I'll discuss that a little bit more in a second, but it's a ranked list of projects that the TPO is actively seeking funds to move forward. And then last table, which is table 3, is all other projects that have funding programmed for the next 5 years. These are projects that are going to move forward imminently. In terms of chronological order, these projects have funding attached to them. They're going to happen within a 5-year period. All right, so to explain that in a little bit more detail, table 1 is a list of projects that have already been elevated to the status of priorities. The data for these projects show that they will address an urgent need in the community, and the projects already received some money for construction. Projects on the list remain there until construction is complete to show that there's still community support for it to be completed. Table 2 includes projects that have been submitted to us by the jurisdictions. So the way that we come up with this wish list of projects is by soliciting the agencies in Hillsborough County. Hillsborough County government, City of Tampa, Plant City, Temple Terrace, Hart, T-BARDA, the Port Authority, the airport, they've all submitted their priority projects to us. We don't take them at face value. We evaluate every project request that we get, and if those project requests meet specific criteria, then they can move on to the priority list. And based on the anticipated effect of constructing that project, we rank them in order from most beneficial to least. Again, like I'll go into a little bit more detail when we get to some PowerPoint slides on that table. I'll explain what I mean, but essentially, like the agencies submit requests to us, we evaluate them, and then they can make it onto the table. Table 3 not only includes projects that are the most imminent, but that table doesn't often get very much attention because those projects may or may not be regionally significant. A lot of the projects that don't attract a lot of attention might be included in table 3. Some of the things that you might find on this table are recurring costs for like maintenance, pesticide application, herbicide, landscaping. Those things typically fall into table 3, and the committees and the public don't really ask too many questions about them because people don't get excited about herbicide applications. But some other things that you might want to pay attention to on table 3 are planning studies. Oftentimes they're listed on table 3. Any project that is in a jurisdiction's capital improvements program will show up there. So any project that the city of Tampa plans on doing next year will also be included in our table 3. For the most part, it's projects led by FDOT though. So again, like the reason why you might want to pay attention to these is because they are imminent and they have funding attached. One important thing to note about table 3, and I think this also comes into play a little bit about why our committees and board don't always pay a ton of attention to projects in table 3, is that the MPO doesn't really control what projects are funded with local dollars. So there's maybe the tendency to just skip over these things because we may not have decision-making authority over them. Many of the projects that are included in table 3 are on there to facilitate coordination among jurisdictions in the TPO. So to go back to table 2 for a second, producing table 2 is the vast majority of the work that my team spends getting the tip ready. The process kind of works like this. Toward the beginning of each calendar year, like February to March, TPO staff meet with the jurisdictions and we go through the list of projects that they have on their priority list. So we'll go through, ask them what projects they would really like to seek federal and state funds for. We ask them if any of their priorities are no longer priorities. That happens sometimes, like a project that's on table 2, they might ask us to delete it because they don't have a desire to move forward. They may ask us to remove it because the project has just stalled for other reasons. Well, anyway, we have these meetings with them. They submit their list of projects that they want to get on table 2. When we receive them, we sort them into one of 5 categories. And I didn't include what the categories are called, but the icons are on the right side of the screen, and most of you should recognize them. That red is state of good repair. So if we get projects related to bridge maintenance or transit maintenance, or T-BARTA submitted a funding request for van pool funds, those could qualify to be in the state of good repair program category. The orange is Vision Zero, safety projects are categorized in there. The purple is smart cities, projects that will enhance reliability on a corridor, a lot of tech projects that can make the roadway operate better could go in there. A lot of traffic signals are funded by the smart cities category. The blue is real choices when not driving, so multi-use paths, side trails, transit operations projects could go in there. This year we have an addition for some roads that need to have sidewalk gaps filled in, could go in there. And then the green is major projects. Major projects is a little bit unique. That's really any project that adds capacity in the traditional sense. So a new transit system or a transit extension might go in major projects. Roadway widenings would be categorized in there. We also reserve that for any priority request that is really expensive. Because we only control a budget of about $20 million in SU funds, we have to split that among the entire list of projects we have. But most of the projects in major projects category will be asking for a huge fraction of that $20 million. And when we put it in there, it's just kind of a signal that the submitter should look at other sources of funds rather than just the funds that the TPO controls.
Johnny, hey, it's Christine. If I may ask a question,
Yep.
and just as a matter of order, I typed a question in the chat space, so I don't know if that's the right thing to do or if you want us just to speak up, but I'll post my question now that I have your attention, and that is, can you just please repeat who you're using two terms I hear, agencies and jurisdictions. So these are the bodies that can make requests and with whom the TPO works to say, what do you want right now and what's important and what's going to make it on this list. So if you could just repeat who those enterprises are and if I have accurately heard those two terms.
Yeah, sorry about that, Christine. Yeah, you correctly pointed out that I sometimes use those terms interchangeably, and that's probably not accurate. I think transportation operating agency is the most accurate way of saying that, but most of the submissions to us come from Hillsborough County and the city of Tampa. The other agencies that we coordinate with to solicit priority requests are Temple Terrace, Plant City, T-BARTA, and Hart. Sometimes, even though we don't solicit requests from them, we can get submissions from the airport, Port Tampa Bay, FIA. There's really no reason why an agency would not be able to qualify for funds, although we don't always solicit priority requests from DOT, they just give them to us. We don't always solicit requests from FIA because most of their projects are funded using their own revenue. When Hillsborough County and the three cities and Hart and T-BARTA come to us to get a project on the priority list, I believe it's because they're anticipating our ability to allocate surface transportation funds, which is like a very specific kind of dollar that the TPO controls. So when they submit their request to us, they're hoping that they're going to get some of that $20-ish million that we have discretionary authority over. I hope that answers your question, Christine. Probably more info than you asked for, but I'll continue on.
No, that sounds great, but does the school board constitute, does Hillsborough County School Board constitute a qualified agency? I gotta say that I don't have any experience in getting project requests from the school board. If they have submitted project requests to us in the past, they're not currently on the priority list. So I can't speak to what has happened historically. I just know that they don't have any requests on our tip or in our tip right now. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Johnny, I'm going to interrupt just a moment as a time check. I do intend to adjourn this meeting at or very close to 6:30 as it was agended out of respect for everyone's time. We're now at 6:04 and I see you're at page 9 of a 34-page PowerPoint. So I'm not sure if you ran this through and checked time earlier or not, but it would appear that we're going to run up against a time crunch. So I just wanted to remind you of that. Don't know what that might mean in your presentation, but there we are.
All right, thank you for that, Chair. No, I'll make it real quick. So anyway, we evaluate all the projects that are submitted to us. We don't just agree with the agencies without vetting their project requests. We have a whole bunch of performance metrics that we look at to ensure that we're programming funds to projects that will make a difference in the goals that we have. I included this slide to decode some of the mystery that surrounds the funding codes. SU stands for, it's like a misnomer, but Surface Transportation Funds. Those are very flexible and can be applied to a wide range of projects. That is the largest source of discretionary funds that the TPO has. The vast majority of the 20 million that we control are SU funds. Some of the others that we have say over our transportation alternatives. Those are commonly used to fund transit, walk, and bike projects. Not only do we evaluate projects based on performance of the project, but we also consider what parts of the community it's impacting. So we spend time performing an EJ analysis to ensure that projects are facilitating equity. We often use whether or not they impact a disadvantaged community as a tiebreaker for two projects that have similar anticipated outcomes. And this is a screening tool that we use to do that work. All right, table 1, as I mentioned, is a list of priorities that have funding programmed for construction. I apologize that I wasn't able to finalize this list in time for tonight's meeting, but I fully anticipate to have that list ready within the next few days. And once it's ready, we'll post it on the website and send you all a note to begin evaluating or reviewing, I should say. I wanted to show some of the performance metrics that we use to prioritize static good repair funds. As far as projects that are submitted to us for money, we look at static good repair first because a long-range transportation goal is to maintain the infrastructure that we already have. So projects that might qualify for this kind of funding are pavement and bridge maintenance, bus maintenance. In fact, $4 million of our SU funds every year is committed to bus replacements. So that represents like roughly 20% of the discretionary funds we have, and we always give it to HART. More recently, we've also been giving HART some money to do capital repairs for like bus stops, and they were the subject of a TIP amendment recently for their heavy maintenance facility. So we spend a lot of our resources making sure that the transit system operates appropriately. On this slide is a list of, or is a draft list of the projects that we have prioritized for this year's TIP update. The projects that are shaded in this light blue are new requests. So HART submitted a request for bus replacements. This year, we're recommending another $4 million to them to be programmed in fiscal year 27 to do the same thing that we always fund, replace old buses. This year, they requested $4.5 million for midlife overhaul of buses. We're not recommending funding because they did not submit an application. Same with the vehicle tracking system. They requested $10 million for this project, and they didn't submit an application. We are recommending $200,000 to TBARDA to fund van pool operations, and we will, this is actually the first year in what I recall as a long time that we've received requests for bridge maintenance or bridge repair. We are not recommending programming funds for those 3 projects this year because they represent really big chunks of our discretionary funds. Like City of Tampa is requesting $12 million for one phase of a bridge repair project, $8 million for another project, and then $6 million for Bayshore seawall reconstruction. That doesn't give us much flexibility in terms of programming other projects. So for SGR, we're recommending about $4.2 million. For safety projects, we look at crash density, focusing specifically on fatalities and serious injuries. We also take a look at what percentage of the project will affect a disadvantaged group. We use that as the tiebreaker. So in our preliminary draft, we are recommending funds for PE, preliminary engineering, to move forward a project on 78th Street from Causeway Boulevard to Palm River Road, recommending $335,000 for preliminary engineering for North 15th Street from Fowler to Fletcher, $200,000 for a planning study on Havana from MLK to Hillsborough Ave, and $225,000 for a project on Fletcher from Armenia to Nebraska Ave. I will say that because we're so early in the process, we haven't reached the limits of our funding yet, so we may choose to recommend funds being programmed for more projects than what you see on this list. Let's see. By the time we make it down to 22 and beyond, we will probably have exasperated or exhausted, I should say, all of our available funds. So even though the list of safety projects is quite long, we definitely don't have enough money to fund all of the projects that we know will have value to the community. So at some point, it becomes very difficult for us to choose which projects to move forward this year. We tend to prioritize projects that are seeking construction dollars because we know we have a huge safety problem and we have plenty of feasibility studies already completed. We would like to actually build something that will have an impact. I'm going to cut it short here if that's okay. Smart cities projects are projects that improve reliability and reduce congestion. I don't believe that we will be recommending funding for any projects in this category this year because we have so many safety projects that were requested of us. So Chair, if it's all right with you, I'm going to abbreviate my presentation and just advance to the part where you all can ask me questions. If you would like me to spend some time, I can discuss major projects. I know that that's probably of interest to you, or I can do that at a later meeting. Chair, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. I was trying to be courteous to a fault. There we go. You can hear me all right now?
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate the presentation and thanks for the abbreviation. As you have been with me, I'm sure you would be equally considerate of the other subcommittee members if they have individual questions they want to address to you outside the context of this meeting. I think all they need to do is send you an email and set up a time to chat. The PowerPoint presentation, as far as it can go at this point, I think was informative. So we don't have to necessarily worry about taking care of every bit of business here in our 60 minutes together. There can be overlap, but having said that, if any members of the subcommittee have questions for Johnny, let's hear you.
I have a couple questions, but I'm the only one speaking so far, so I don't want to interrupt. How many of our CAC members do we even have on this call? Just 3 of us?
There are 4 of us. I took 5.
4. Okay, I see Bill Roberts has joined too. All right, let me go for 1 or 2 questions. Johnny, if you could put up the list again. I just want to touch on a couple things. I saw something that said $300,000 requested by FDOT to fund walk, bike, safety enhancements, or no, education and outreach, I think.
Yeah. Yes.
So I'm wondering, I know that FDOT has previously funded the organization coalition called Bike Walk Tampa Bay, and I'm wondering if that's what this is. I do know that it's. Do you know if that's what it is? Is it for Bike Walk Tampa Bay, a regional coalition?
Christine, I'm not entirely certain exactly what that funds. That request has been on the tip list for a number of years. I know that it originally was Peter Schuh's team wanting some funds to do community education. I don't
Okay.
believe that we have awarded that money in quite a while. And one of the topics that we're going to look at internally is maybe taking it off, because there are other ways to fund those kind of education programs. And it doesn't, we don't have criteria to evaluate it. So it's been
Okay.
at the very bottom of that Vision Zero list for a long time. And,
Okay.
you know, again, like our priority is to fund construction.
Sure. Well, I guess I want to make sure, like, for two things, and this applies to the van pool too. These are regional programs, and so I would just want to make sure that Hillsborough County is not the only contributor. If other, you know, to offset the cost borne. I think for the T-BARDA van pool last year, we did amend the language so that it would include for van pool and active transportation. So we could try to, if there needed to be any solutions for people to actually get to the van pool rendezvous point, you know, I mean, otherwise all you have is a bunch of park and rides in the various, you know, parking lots of Lowe's and Home Depot and, you know, all that out in the far-reaching part of the community. So there was that. And I want to just about that bike walk, if it is Bike Walk Tampa Bay, that's run by Cutter. And what I think has happened is that neither state organization can exonerate the other. So they just have a paperwork problem that's my short understanding of that neither the USF nor FDOT can exonerate each other to accept funds. And so that just seems like a different kind of problem that I hope someone is solving somewhere in the process, if in fact these are the funds that would otherwise be requested for that.
I can do some digging and let you know whether,
Thank you.
let you know if we ever funded that and what it went for. Like I said, it's just been on the list for a long time, and I'm not sure why it's still on there.
Thank you.
Okay, Christine, thank you for those questions. Anyone else on the call have questions for Johnny? Please don't be shy. That's all we're here for.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat, and it looks like everyone is muted.
Okay. Well, it may be that you have been so incredibly informative that no one has a single question. You're just the teacher of the year. And I guess it worked for everybody but me, so I do have a couple of questions. And if anybody thinks of something they want to say or ask, please don't butt in. I'll shut up and you guys can have the floor. But we have 15 minutes and I have a couple of questions, so I might as well fill the time we have. Johnny, first of all, I wanted to clarify and make sure that everyone on the call understands that the actual draft of this year's tip has not been uploaded to the web yet. It's not available. It's not what we have in front of us now. Even though it may be abbreviated from previous years, there's a lot more to come. And I thought maybe that was going to be on the web available to us last week, but for whatever reason, it's not. Now, is that accurate?
Yeah, my apologies. We received the final draft of DOT's work program just this past Friday, and we spent all of Friday and most of today trying to get this ready to present to you all. I expect that we'll have this in more or less final draft condition by the end of the week. And we plan on presenting a draft of the tip, so tables 1, 2, and 3 in the document, to the Technical Advisory Committee next Monday. And by the time we have the next full CAC meeting, you will certainly have access to the more or less complete tables and tip document.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So we don't have every leg of the three-legged stool yet, but we can do as much as we can with your help, and I appreciate that. And no apologies necessary. I just want to make sure everybody was understood. what we're
Yeah.
dealing with.
Table 2 is the one that's closest to being complete. That was the only one I felt comfortable to share right now. Table 1 and Table 3 are just, there was too much info to share.
Okay, fair enough. Since you mentioned those, actually, I did have a question about, it's not really about the slide, but slide 5 of 34 lists the 3 different tables or categories. And I was hoping you might explain, based on your experience, what is available to us, or I guess more appropriately to the board, in terms of what can be done between and among those various buckets of projects. And by that, I mean a project that may be in table 1 bucket that for whatever reason, there might be a movement afoot to move that project out of table 1 into table 2, or one in table 2 that we might want to see moved into table 1, and how it is that that might be facilitated. Are there any mechanisms in place of which you are aware? And if so, how would we as a CAC advance that kind of a recommendation to the board?
Yeah, sure. That's a little bit complicated, but I'll try to make
Well, just make it a 6th grader's version, and we can get into more weeds later. But
the short answer is that the CAC as a committee can make a motion to move projects laterally or vertically off of any of these lists. Whether or not it's within the TPO's power to enforce that an agency follows suit is up to someone else's decision-making authority, like well beyond mine. For example, when I look at table 1 as a TPO, as TPO staff, I think to myself, there's not much that the TPO board can do about these projects because they have already advanced beyond the design stage of preliminary engineering. Like to appear on table 1 means that there's some construction funding attached, and by that point, it is maybe out of the TPO board's hands. Again, like I'm not the legal counsel on this, but that's just my understanding of it. However, I don't believe that there's anything that prevents the committee from making a motion requesting that the board move a project off of table 1.
okay.
Yeah.
No, I think that probably. I was just trying to get my arms around the breadth of our charge, and what you just said makes perfect sense to me. But I don't know that we've ever done that in the time that I've been on the CAC. We've moved to strike items from the tip and make those kinds of recommendations. But I don't remember ever making a recommendation to the board that they move something laterally up or down on the ladder. So, again, beneath every layer of onion, there's another.
Yeah, within that context, I'll add, because we're talking about the CAC's charge, for table 2, I think that there is a lot of latitude for the committee and the boards to act on these projects, especially for a project that is seeking funds for PD&E, project development and engineering, or preliminary engineering, because these projects would not have advanced beyond that, as Cameron called it, I forget what he called it, like the point of no return, I think. So for projects that are on table 2, they're ranked. We've looked at them with our quantitative metrics. Staff is providing a recommendation to the TPO board about how to divide the funds that we have. If the committee or members of the public have some insight that isn't reflected in the performance metrics, they can share that information with the board and maybe convince the board to divide the money in a way that we're not recommending. So again, like there's a lot of latitude for how you can make recommendations regarding projects on table 2. Table 3, I think that for most of the projects, your ability to act is also quite limited, especially for projects that are funded with local dollars. TPO has no authority over that whatsoever. And projects in the DOT work program, you can make a motion recommending that the DOT reconsider a project, but again, like most of those projects don't attract much attention because they're very small in scale and scope.
Okay. Before I weigh into my next question, does anybody have any question for Johnny that they may have thought of in the interim?
I thought I saw Christine unmute herself a little while ago. I'm not sure if she had a question or not, but I don't see anything in the chat right now.
Okay. Well, let me ask this question and then I'll close for myself. You mentioned the point of no return, and there has been conversation both at the CAC and at the board level over the course of just even the last few months of identifying projects that are at or near that point as far as the DOT or the TPO staff might believe. Is there an intent on the part of staff to somehow earmark those projects on the tip as it is being presented to us beginning next month?
Yes, definitely. We were not able to incorporate this change into the tables ahead of this meeting, but we will add a column somewhere in this table indicating what phase is seeking funding, and we'll flag any projects that are seeking funding for PE. That will be the best indication that you'll have that it's time to make a decision. Like if you don't like that project, that would be the most appropriate time to request that the board remove it.
Okay.
Yeah, we will definitely flag those projects.
All right, thank you. We're down to the last 3 minutes of the meeting. I'm certainly not adverse to letting it slide over, maybe a couple if necessary, but at this point, does anyone on the call have any other comment or question for Johnny?
I had another question, Johnny, if I may chime in. When you meet with the city of Tampa or others who might benefit from earmarks requested through federal legislators that cover our area, do they share that with you as well? Like, are you familiar with earmark requests that are going to, say, Representative Castor or others?
Yes, sometimes I am made privy to that information. We kind of serve as the mouthpiece for the DOT. We've been told that requesting earmarks really messes up the state transportation budget. So if an agency approaches us and asks us what we suggest as far as like how can they secure the funds to move a project forward, we will never say that earmarks is a good way to fund projects. However, whether or not an earmark is sought is up to the discretion of the legislator. So we're often informed well after the fact.
Thank you. And then my last question is, how has this process changed at all since the passage of the infrastructure bill?
Yes, slightly. We are now, well, we're going to be suggesting some funding types that were identified in the infrastructure bill. There seem to be quite a few pots of money available for bridges and major projects. I believe that there is a new fund type for projects that reduce carbon emissions. So we'll identify the appropriate funding mechanism for projects based on our understanding of them. But I think that that's really the only change as a result of the Infrastructure Act.
Are you good, Christine?
I should have said
Thank you, Rick. Yes, that's all I've got.
Okay. Well, what's left with our brief moment or two is to just chat a moment about what may come next for the subcommittee in the context of the work of the committee as a whole. We have a May CAC meeting, our regular meeting, and at that time, as I understand it, the tip will be presented to us as the committee of a whole for a first view. That's standard fare. What I'm suggesting is that we would have another subcommittee meeting, this meeting, to be scheduled after that for further analysis in our context as a focus group, if you will. And it has also been suggested that the committee of a whole have a workshop on the tip, perhaps the third week of May, which would be some of us who've been on this committee a little while have already been through a workshop of this sort. If you could imagine going out for beers with members of the committee and talking about the tip without having to worry about the sunshine law, that's basically what I envision this workshop to be. But it would be in the sunshine. It would be noticed. We'd order pizza. We'd be in a room probably down on the first floor of the county center. And if those that want to attend and can't do it in brick and mortar world want to do it virtually, we would have to facilitate that. But it would allow us an opportunity to have a conversation without the burden of Robert's rules about the tip, as we have by then heard about it 2 or 3 different times, and maybe be in a position to etch out whatever differences or concerns we may be having at that point before we are presented with the tip in June. At that point, we would be asked to make a recommendation to the TPO board. So it gives us more than one shot at the apple, more than one shot at the information, and an actual opportunity for us in the workshop setting with the entire committee, or as many as would like to come, to talk it through. We've done it before. It worked very well. I think Bill Roberts actually was on the committee at that time as chair of that meeting. And there may be others that were too. I just don't remember right now. But that's kind of what's evolving in my mind as a way to dance through this next few weeks up through the June meeting. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Hey, Rick, it's Christine. I think it's a great idea. I would welcome the opportunity. As is always the case, it's a matter of scheduling. So
Sure.
you mentioned the third week of May. We have, I would opt for the fourth week in May that starts with the 23rd, but that'll just have to be a doodle or whatever we come up with. But I'm very, very much in favor of a more conversational deep dive into the tip this year. That would be very helpful to me personally.
Okay. Well, the only thing really that controls when we would do the workshop is that we have to do it before we meet as a CAC in June. So anytime toward the latter part of May, and yeah, Johnny's great with his doodles, so I guess I would be the way to address that. I think I may have heard Bill Roberts' voice chiming in there.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. I was just going to say I fully support the idea of a workshop. I think it's worked well in the past, and I would certainly be pleased if Johnny would doodle or communicate with the committee and try to pick that date as soon as possible.
Cool. Bill, do you remember that? I'm thinking that workshop that I've got stuck in my head, we probably did in 2019. I seem to remember Les Miller coming and talking to us, and there was public comment, and then we had a very nice conversation around the tip. Does that sound right to you?
Rick, it sounds probably right. I can't remember if Commissioner Miller came at a separate workshop or if he came at the one we had for the tip. But regardless, either one or both of those I thought were very productive, and it gave the CAC members a chance to really dive deeply into the tip.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking we had done it in 2020, but we couldn't have. We were already locked down with COVID by then, so it had to be before that. But anyway, Johnny, if you're going to be looking for an exemplar agenda for such a meeting, I would begin looking probably in May of 2019. That's more than likely where you're going to find it. For the workshop that I'm thinking about, that was in person. I don't remember if we had another one in 20 or 21, to be honest. But I know we had that one at least, and it was well received. Okay, if there's no other business for the committee, I'll give you a chance. Anybody that wants to chime in with something, have at it. Okay, if not, at 6:35, I appreciate you all taking the time, and we are adjourned.
Thank you, Rick. Good meeting.
Johnny, thank you. Bill, thanks. Everybody, thank you. Johnny, I'll follow up with you later. I do have some additional questions, and I guess the next thing will be just to schedule this workshop and the next subcommittee meeting for that matter. We'll have two things to schedule after the CAC meeting. Okay.
Yeah, we'll work on that and get the doodle poll out within the next day or two, and then we'll check and see what rooms the county has available.
All right, cool beans. Thank you. Appreciate you facilitating. Good night, everybody.
Bye.